Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I had a subscriber ask a question. Hey Jason, could you explain what bodybuilders are talking about when they talk about a mind-muscle connection when they are training? So let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, work on skilling up my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. Now, some people are going to say, Jason, I've heard you make a video on this in the past. Yes, I have. Actually, I've probably covered this 3 different times over the years, probably 3 different videos on this, but you know what? People still keep asking the questions, and I have a lot more subscribers than people who viewed those videos on the view count. So clearly, people don't know. So I'm going to go ahead and cover it again. And I'm going to cover a couple of different points, because I've hit some other points of this later in different types of videos, having to do with multiple stimulus in your body at the same time and what you actually feel. But first of all, let's discuss what they're actually talking about. All right, guys, people started talking about this mind-muscle connection back when New Agey type stuff was getting really, really big. Like in the 80s, it became a big part of mainstream society, particularly out in California and stuff. And it became popular to talk about your mind connection, mind-body connection, all this stuff. This was a big deal back in the 80s, and a lot of bodybuilding writers picked up on this because they were out in California and stuff also. So it's just trying to sound esoteric. It's just trying to sound spiritual or New Agey or whatever. That's all that term is. That's where it came from. What they mean is, when you're training, you actually feel the muscle. That's all they're saying. That's it. That's all they mean, that you feel the muscle. Well, let me ask you a question. When do you usually feel a muscle the most, or what style of training? I want you to think about that for a moment. When you're doing strict isolation of a muscle, you usually feel that muscle contract more. You feel it more in that muscle if it's the muscle that's doing almost all the work. That's doing 90 to 100% of the work. That's where you're going to feel it every single time. Meaning, if you go to do a concentration curl and you do really strict with 20 pounds, down on your leg, do you feel that more? Or do you feel it more when you go heavier to 25 pounds and you swing a little bit? You swing a little bit, even trying to lean on your leg. You usually feel it more with the lighter weight, with the more controlled motion. Usually the better and the stricter the form you use, the more you feel it in a muscle. So if someone's talking about mind-muscle connection, talking about feeling it in the muscle, they mean using a technique, focusing on using a technique, concentrating on using a technique where you feel it in the muscle the most. Well, that almost always, every single time, that means you're just using a really, really strict form. That's it, because that's when you feel it the most. There's nothing magical about that. It's not like you're experimenting and messing around with stuff, because you'll find every single time when you're concentrating on feeling it in the muscle the most, in order to feel it in the muscle the most, you have to be stricter. It's less swinging, less involving other muscles. So mind-muscle connection is basically saying use strict form, use good form. That's all it is. And I know that's going to sound silly that they've come up with this term for it, but what they really just mean is use good form. But the difference is, does that mean that that's automatically associated with more muscle growth? No, not really, because people can try to argue anecdotally all day long about what causes growth. Well, I tried this and my muscle grew more, but did it really? Are you sure? Like, did you measure it? Did you change anything else? Did you do this under scientific conditions, or did you just find that out? Because honestly, I think good form definitely should be used. You should always use good form. But does good form automatically ensure more growth? Not necessarily. It doesn't ensure more tension, and that's the thing. And people will say, well, you're feeling it more in the muscle. How could that be? If you're feeling it more in the muscle, you're clearly stimulating it more. And I'm going to argue, no, that's not actually true. Now, I will go so far as to say, if you are doing an isolation movement, you should probably try to use really strict form, because if you want to turn an isolation movement into a compound, that's just kind of silly. Why don't you just do a compound movement? You know, if you really feel like you need to isolate a muscle, what does that mean? That means that you feel that muscle is lagging. You feel that that muscle is not getting as good a development as your other muscles doing compounds. So you're trying to catch it up by working it more and the other muscles less, right? Common sense. That's the whole purpose of an isolation movement. So if you're cheating and turning an isolation into a compound, you're working other muscles. That defeats the whole purpose. That really defeats the entire purpose of even doing an isolation movement. People shouldn't isolate every muscle in their body. There's no need for that. You're isolating the muscles that really need extra work. That's why you're doing it. You do isolation curls and concentration curls when? when you feel that your biceps are not developing in the rate that you want. You feel like you need your biceps to be growing faster than some of your other muscles. That's why you're isolating it, so that you're cutting other muscles out so it can get some work, additional work that the other muscles aren't getting, so it can catch up. I mean, when you really think about it, that's the role that isolation plays. It makes sense. But it doesn't automatically mean more growth just because you feel it there. And I'm going to discuss some exercises in a minute, but I'm going to discuss something else. You ever had anyone play one of those stupid jokes on you? You're younger and your head hurts. Oh man, I wish my head quit hurting, and had some idiot stomp on your foot and say, oh, your head doesn't hurt now, does it? You know, when we were kids and things. But do you know what? You forgot about your headache for a few seconds, didn't you? Yeah, when they stomped on your foot, did you notice your head hurting for a few seconds? For maybe 5, 10, 15 seconds, your head didn't hurt. Did whatever was causing your headache go away? Did the dehydration that's causing your headache, or the tension that's causing your headache, or any of that, did it physically disappear? No. But you had another pain stimulus that it was new. It might have not been any more painful than your headache, to be fair, but because it was new, you're now experiencing multiple pain stimulus. You fixate on one more than the other. All right? Your conscious brain picks up one more than the other. Your subconscious brain doesn't stop registering. In fact, we know that your body registers pain when you don't notice it. Meaning, when we have people under full anesthesia to where they can't remember anything, and obviously they won't consciously determine any pain, that when we check stuff, the pain sensors in their brains light up when they're being cut during surgery. Every time they're cut, their pain sensors in their brain light up. Your brain registers pain whether you notice it or not. Your brain notices. So in that case, though, you consciously forgot about it. I would suggest that training stimulus when you feel muscles is the exact same way. Case in point, if you do a concentration curl really strictly to 10 reps to absolute failure, did your bicep get worked to a 10 rep failure? Yes, it did. Did you probably stimulate as much muscle fiber activation as humanly possible in your bicep in that set for a single set? Yeah, I mean, about a 10 rep set is going to be to failure, is probably going to be maximum stimulation that you could get off a single set. All right, you're not going to really stimulate more than that without doing more sets or more exercises. Fair enough? Pretty much universally understood. How about if you do kind of a cheat curl standing? Same thing. You take a weight that you reach failure even using a little bit of swing in it. Using a little bit of cheat and a little bit of swing in it, you reach failure with 10 reps. Did your bicep still probably reach failure? Yes, it did. But you probably feel your bicep a little bit less than when you did it with a concentration curl. But did it actually do less work? No. It did the same amount of work. Did the same amount of work, probably had the same amount of tension, probably had the same amount of workload applied to it, right? But you probably felt a little less burn in it than you did with the strict concentration curl. How about if you do 10 rep weighted chin up? Maybe you can only do chin ups, normal chin ups, but dead hang weighted chin ups, you do 10 reps to failure with whatever weight you can handle. Chin ups have been shown in study after study to work the biceps just as much as a curl. If you do 10 reps to failure on a chin up though, your biceps might hurt a little bit, but usually you feel your lats, everything else, your back, all of that stuff burns. You notice that more because it's a bigger stimulus. But did your biceps get the same amount of work as they did on the concentration curl? Yeah. Did they get the same amount of work that they got on the cheating curls? Yeah, but you feel it in your biceps even less with the chin-ups. Why? Because you had additional stimulation taking your conscious brain away from the fact that your biceps just got fatigued and were pumping and failed and, got worked really, really hard on a single set because you had other muscles, bigger muscles all involved. You're feeling that same sensation that you get on the concentration curl. The same amount of work was done. You're feeling it spread to other places because you had similar amount of work done in different points in your body that you register differently. So the one that you notice the most might vary. It might be your lats. It might be your biceps. It might be your rear delt. It might be your shoulder where you feel it the most. It's going to depend upon the situation, the person, and what happened. But the one that you feel most doesn't mean that it got worked the most necessarily. We know from all three of those that I just described, you pretty much got about the same amount of work in your biceps, but they all have a different feel. Which one would the mind-muscle connection say did the best? Concentration curl, because you notice it in your brain. You're connected to the muscle more there. It doesn't mean that it got more work. Absolutely doesn't mean that it got more work. But here is the kicker. Here's where it does matter. Anytime you're looking at that of where you feel the muscle the most, if you are doing isolation movements, if you really feel it on one more than another, that means that you're probably, with the technique you're using for that, you're probably isolating the muscle a little bit better. And if your goal is to bring up purely that muscle as a lagging weak point, you want to make sure that it's getting extra work without other stuff being stimulated, because it really is a weakness for you, then that actually might be a reasonable strategy. That might be a good strategy to do what you did on that exercise. Pick that exercise and that technique again to help bring up that lagging muscle, because it means it is being isolated the best. And isolating a muscle that really is truly lagging behind other muscles that you need to be growing faster is a good way to do so. It's a great method to do so. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.